it was really nasty, and I had to take her down and with together and go to the bankruptcy court under a dark, dank place in the city hall where they had judges set up in tables. And I had a screenshot on my phone of the amount of money we had in our bank account, which was around $569 total. It's on my phone. It leaves with me. I know where it's at in case I ever need to look at it and remind myself of what's really hard.
Welcome to an inspirational people interview on the Share Life podcast. I'm Jason Scott Montoya, and today I'm speaking with Neil Twa, CEO and founder of Voltage. Neil, say hello.
Hello. How are we doing today?
Neil, yeah, doing well. Neil is the CEO and co-founder of Voltage, where he leads an amazing team who launches, operates, scales, acquires, and exits e-commerce brands with a focus on Amazon, FBA, and multi-channel. So Neil, thank you for joining us. We're going to get to know you and tell us about who you are and your story.
We called it I'd Been Moved because I was flying all the time between my cell phone and laptop to different projects all over the country, all over the world. It was a pretty busy time. I had quite a phase there of time with being an actual road warrior, where you have all the platinum this and the extra that, and you sleep in hotels and you sleep sometimes on the floor in airports, that fun stuff.
Yeah. What was
It was
technology like
interesting.
at that moment? That was
Oh
2007
man,
at the end?
yeah. Well, this would have been 2000 and in the 2000 to 2007 period between two different companies. I was in a startup at Sprint when it launched the mobile division. That led me to IBM. But
Okay.
yeah, technology changed amazingly fast in that decade. Mobile life came online, which led to the desktop internet life, which led to, people and systems and stuff were coming online. And IBM, the technology was moving so fast that most people don't understand what's actually coming because we were doing latent semantic search engine, large language models. I was working with a team up in Armonk, where they hand out the 18,000 patents a year from IBM, and the double docs and the scientific data scientists and stuff were working on knowledge management, human machine language learning, and artificial intelligence. And I'm telling you, some of the stuff we were doing back then, we haven't even seen yet.
Yeah.
So the tip of the iceberg for AI is just at the early adoption stages right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So how did you get into that originally?
Yeah. Well, I sort of fell into that because out of need, when I joined Sprint as a full-time employee, the first mobile phone was being launched, and that was just
Mm,
cutting edge of the industry. They were some of the first leaders, so they got out of the pack early. It was considered a startup. I was just working as a programmer, programming knowledge management resources for Sprint long distance as a contractor when they did a cattle call inside and said, hey, we're looking to fund as many people who want to join this new division called PCS, Personal Communication Services. We're launching the first mobile phone and such. You want to be a part, put your name in. Like, hey, I went to my manager. I'm like, hey, I'm a contractor, but can I put my name in? He's like, absolutely. So
yeah.
I got hired as a 21-year-old, know-it-all who was managing five people 20 years older than me.
And
So
what year was that?
that was 2000.
2000. Okay. So
Mhm.
right in the Y2K era as well.
Yeah, man, right after the whole "we're all gonna die" kind of stuff, and then oh,
Yeah.
but we're not dead, so now what? Well, I guess the internet's here. Let's figure that out.
Yeah.
And all the dot-com blow up that happened had kind of settled down, and so people,
Mm,
in different areas were finding their ways. In the mobile telecom industry was just really starting its full mature
yeah.
growth into the market.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So you go from IBM to launching your own business,
I did.
co-founding a business called Voltage. That big
Yeah.
sign in
Well,
your
Voltage
background
actually
there.
came a little bit later. I co-founded
Okay.
my business in around 2012, but the first iteration of it was me
Okay.
figuring out my way in life as a
Yeah.
business person. I did a consulting group that I started myself after I left IBM. That's kind of what I knew, business technology and info systems consulting. And that led to having about 10 people on my team
Mm,
doing that, making them fly around the country as I was learning to expand myself and get away from trading time for money. Because in the first, little bit, while I did better as a contractor and even had IBM, become a subcontractor to IBM
mm.
afterwards, where I was, instead of making 120,000 a year, I was billing 250 an hour. So that was
Yeah.
fun. But I still
So
sitting,
they were
trading
your
time for
first
money.
client?
Yeah, they actually one of my first larger clients. Yeah, I went
Yeah.
back on projects. They called me back in, said, "Hey, we broke this project. We don't need an employee. Would you come contract?" And I'm like, "Sure, I'll 250 bucks an hour, and I'll be there." And they're like, "Done." I was, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
So that was cool.
Yeah.
But I was still trading time for money. I still wasn't in,
Yeah.
systems, businesses, and processes. I was still in entrepreneurial mode, and I was still
Yeah.
trying to figure out what to do, what to sell. I could sell myself, so I started with that. And then that kind of led me to the next steps, which was how to mature into a businessman and actually understand the different, movements of that from, what am I going to sell and what the heck am I doing to, okay, I think I've got some starting business going and now what I want to become, What I didn't want it to become was road warrior again. I didn't want to travel again. I traveled 300
Mm,
days the last year in IBM. I'm like, no, I don't want to do that again. I'm done with that.
kind of been there, done that.
Been there, done that. Got the platinum miles on every airline, and still used them 5 years until after I left. Hilton hotel
So,
points and everything else.
so what were some of the biggest lessons you learned during that era of your life?
The era of leaving and starting my own business.
Well, I guess both of them, but yeah,
Yeah.
just all of it.
Well, let's see. For IBM, it was really understanding that it was a very different corporate structure. So I went from being in a corporate building with Sprint to now I've got a laptop. I'm flying around with an MX card, and it was
Hmm.
ironic because the first year I was there, I wasn't at least the first few years. Actually, this has been I'm getting my dates wrong, but like last few years into Sprint when I was actually traveling. I was 25, so I still couldn't rent a car at that age
Yeah.
because they wouldn't allow us. So I was able to get manager approval to do my business work, which is weird. So by the time I got to IBM, that was kind of gone. So now I was freewheeling with an Amex card and my own expense account, and getting out there and doing the business. So that was different. It was really a non-corporate corporate feel, if that makes sense, because now I was going to different locations and I was supporting clients and I was traveling to different places in the
Mm,
world, and that was cool because that kind of freed me up to feel like, well, I sort of am doing a lot of this on my own, even though I wasn't. But when I left to do
mm,
my own thing, that became very evident. Well, you're doing it all now, including what your tax is like and how do you manage a business
mm,
and how do you're the last one in, the last one to close, the one that deals with the accounting, the invoicing, and you do all of it now. It's like, oh,
hmm.
wow, that's a whole different ball of wax
Yeah.
to deal with. So that was quite an eye opening experience to get through that first 3 4 years of figuring it all out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What were the things you most missed that you lost and had to do yourself?
Yeah, there's the feeling of security that wasn't secure.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
I knew that I could it was a job. Let's call it what it is. I knew what it was.
Yeah.
But at the same time I was kind of like, well, if I'm doing a great job and I'm getting all my performance reviews and there's really no reason I should be fired. But at the same time, it's still a job. So when the number got called in January of 2007, and they're like, "Oh, your number came up along with your group, and you guys are going to be let go, or you may be relocated, or we don't know exactly. Just know it's going to
Hmm.
change, and maybe you'll move to Argentina or not if you don't want to, or whatever." And I'm like, "Oh, well, that's a lot of ambiguity." That
Yeah.
got really clarified in June of 2007 when they're like, "Oh, here's your early retirement." I was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
"Oh, cool." Well, the choice was made for me, which you don't. That's not security, right?
Yeah.
Freedom
It.
is a component of what I call my five F's now. And after that, and
Mm,
for the last 18 years, the five F's have become the framework by which I do everything. That's
yeah.
faith, family, friends, finances, and freedom. And the
Okay.
pillar of all those is the freedom to
Yeah.
choose, the freedom to own the consequences, positive or negative, and not have them necessarily forced on you, but you still have a
Mm,
choice. Now, I see that differently now because I still had a choice to leave IBM or not. I just had to deal
mhm,
with certain consequences I wasn't prepared
mm,
for, and I wasn't in the right mind frame of, empowering myself to be okay with that versus feeling
mhm,
like a scarcity victim mindset was kicking in because, well, this
mm.
happened to me. And those are two very different ways to approach business. And I learned to very much change that into one where I'm
Yeah.
empowered. I have the freedom of choice. Yes, finances might be impacted or family or friends by those choices, but ultimately I have the freedom. And that's really where the whole empowerment thing changes in this game.
Yeah. So talk to us more about, you mentioned victim mindset. Like
Yeah.
what is that to you, and how were you able to get out of that into something more fruitful?
Well, yeah, it was one by realizing that as you take ownership of things and no one's there to back you up, you then have to take responsibility. And with that, you either do it or die. It's like provide or don't provide. And so when you
Hmm.
get moved into that thing, it's kind of like, well, scarcity can be there and you can play what I call the what if game. What if this
Yeah.
happens? What if that doesn't happen? What if I go here? What if this job doesn't land? What if this doesn't go? And then you realize, well, okay, abundant people think if that doesn't work, there's another thing. If this doesn't fit, there's another thing. If this isn't the solution, there's another solution. If this doesn't, you start to work a pattern of repetitive conditioning in your brain and your mind every day
Mm,
that literally says, if that doesn't work, I'll go another direction. If this doesn't happen, I'll go a different place. If that deal doesn't close, I'll find another deal. If this doesn't,
yeah.
you never put too much emphasis on any one component that can change. And an
Yeah.
abundant mindset person is like, well, all of it can change. A
Yeah.
scarcity person says, well, all of it, but this can change. And if this changes, my whole life is ruined,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because this has to happen. If it doesn't happen, all this thing is going to go bad. And
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, you get into that too far and you will not see the proverbial forest through the trees. You will not see the way people are dealing with you. You might not see how the business isn't working. You
Mm,
might see how you've, really pulled things down so far that you can no longer support others except yourself. And when scarcity
Yeah.
kicks in, it's all about you. It's
Yeah.
all about you.
Jim.
All the talk,
Yeah.
language, everything you're doing is about you. And you won't sell
Selfish. Yeah.
anything. You won't convince anybody to work with you, and you won't get any business done if it's all about you.
Yeah. So react to this quote. This is from Jim Collins, Great
Mm.
by Choice. 10Xers differ from their less successful comparisons in how they maintain hyper-vigilance in good times as well as bad.
Hmm.
Even in calm, clear, positive conditions, 10Xers constantly consider the possibility that events could turn against them at any moment. Indeed, they believe that conditions will absolutely, with 100% certainty, turn against them without warning at some
That's
unpredictable
right.
point in time, at some highly inconvenient moment, and they'd better be prepared.
See that orange book right over there?
Yeah, is that it?
Yeah.
Great by Choice?
Even though some parts of it are out of date, it was very profound to me to think differently about that. And one of the things in there that he talks about is how there's a bus and you have a bus and everybody gets on the bus or
Yeah,
doesn't get on the bus. Either you choose to let them on or not get on. And when they do get on the bus, you're choosing to let them on. So when they come, you decide where do they seat on the bus?
yeah,
Where do they sit? And then you decide, well, at times, well, you may have the permission to be at the front of the bus because you're more trusted or this is working, or you may move to the middle of the bus, or you may move to the back of the bus. But one thing is for sure, at the back of the bus, you kick yourself off. I don't kick you off. You get moved
yeah,
back there, but then you decide whether or not you get to move back to the front. So
yeah.
everybody potentially has a seat, and sometimes seats need to be shifted.
Mhm.
And the sooner you make those decisions and empower yourself to make those decisions and not hang on to the what if, or I'm going to keep, pandering to this person who I thought was going to help me in this business and they didn't, and I hired them and they're not doing their job. Instead, you just say, hey, I'm going to change your position. And if you don't change your position, then you know where the door is,
Yeah.
right? You can see yourself off the bus. And good to great companies had management that really understood that. They managed
Mm.
by exception, which meant, in simple terms, everything can change. It's probably going to change. And if it does change without me knowing how it was going to change, it's probably a negative. So I'm going to be aware that that is not considered necessarily the most positive thing, but my opportunity is to spin it, reform it, reshape it, reframe it, and move it into a positive or go a different direction. And that is
Yeah.
a normal process of business. And the
Yeah.
more and longer you go, the more you realize how true that actually is.
Yeah. So let's go back a minute here because you said about the security of employment versus the security of entrepreneurship. And so if
Yeah.
someone's like, whoa, 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 you're saying entrepreneurship is more secure and employment is less secure, which is, I believe, the case. But some people think it's the other way around. Explain
Yeah.
why that is.
Well, I have a control as to whether or not I get up, I work the business, I continue the process forward, I service a client, or I help with our brand, or I look at a company acquisition, or we do some component of the business. I have a choice. I could get up and walk away from it tomorrow. I have the same choice in my life, my family, my relationship with my wife. I have choices. Everybody does. No one's a victim of their circumstance. So with that, you then start to look at the approach to life and business very differently and you realize, well, I am choosing to do these things, I'm choosing not to do those things. And when it gets down to the most basic component of it, it's time. Where do I want to spend my time, right? Who do I want to spend my time with? As a business owner, having moved past entrepreneurialism, which is that flaky stage of changing things 10 times, trying to figure out who you are, what you're doing, or how you work. As a business owner, you gain more stability and security because you know who you are, you know what service you're providing, you know what value you have to the market, and you also know how you're going to get paid by it. And with
Yeah.
that, you realize there's almost a never ending opportunity that requires some shifting, some change, some adaptation to the market changes and the conditions that do always change. But you're the business owner. You're no longer the entrepreneur. You're no longer wondering, is it going to work? You're no longer wondering if it's the right path for you or that you're in the right place. You're just shifting. And in that, opportunity is always created. A business owner sees opportunities to diversify revenue in their business and to pivot past certain things or towards certain things as market conditions change, which again, they always do. Therefore, there's more stability in my knowing that I'm not alone in this anymore. My partner's in that with me. We have all these people around us, operators, we have clients, we've got business partners and systems and processes in place now, which create significantly more stability. And because I'm at the top end and in the partnership role, I have more of control over how that works and what's going on. And I have an ability to pivot and make changes that empower me to do the things that will overcome those problems. I'm not
Yeah.
just sitting around waiting for somebody else to decide I'm no longer of value.
Yeah. So how do you like does any of that translate to your personal life? Like what does it mean to live better? for
It
you?
absolutely does, because for 18 years of moving away from the corporate world and all that other nonsense, I shifted out of the idea that, how much I make and what accolades I have or profits I gain are the primary focus. And I've gone to purpose and value over profits. While profits
Mm,
are a component of what I do, they're now part of my five F's, which means I have to profit across multiple places. And as you know, finances is only one of that. I
hmm.
have to have profit in those other areas. So I won't jeopardize the family, the purpose, the drive, the things that I'm doing for profit.
Yeah.
Right. And that means I'm not going to fly without my family coming along. I'm not going to do things without my kids. I'm not going to exclude my wife from the things we're doing. We've now built a lifestyle that revolves around that. So we're at home. We live on 60 plus acres in the country. My parents are up the hill. We do life here. We homeschool our kids. We run as a group. My kids are being trained in their businesses and business activities to learn as we transparently talk about finances and money and business and other things and train them up in that knowledge so they can look at the opportunities that they can be afforded in the stuff that we struggled past to get to this point,
Hmm.
but not in just giving it to them, but empowering them in ways to take ownership and control over it, as opposed to
Yeah.
just trust funds or money, or just do this and here's your thing and don't pay any attention to what dad's doing. We do this
Yeah.
as a business. We talk around the table. We make plans for things. We talk about the way our life works in the business. And we are traveling in August together as a family to an event I'm part of a strategic partnership with, where I'm going to be presenting and meeting with other partners. And they're coming with us because they're going to be
Yeah.
there. They're going to have conversations. I have four daughters, by the way.
Okay.
So my job and my wife have come to a place where we don't want to make, and this isn't for everybody, and it might not tickle the right ears, but I don't want to make business women out of my
Yeah.
women, right?
Okay.
Not everybody agrees, and that's fine. Everybody has freedom, right? Yay. So for me, I want them to see what their purpose is, what their godly purpose is, and to give them the opportunities to be empowered in the business or businesses that we have that might support them, help them if they get married someday, helping my future son-in-laws or whatever. Significant others get be a part of that, and so I see that as a different mechanism than I did before. I see that as their education. I see that as their training. I see that as their opportunity. I see their potentials to earn in a month what other people earn in a year, only because I struggled to get to that place over 18 years. And what good am I doing it to them if I just send them back in the system and don't train them up or teach them on any of those things every day?
So you're trying to equip them to essentially get to where you got to, but in a more accelerated timeline.
Well, for them, it can be more accelerated. Why? Because they know about it. It's their life.
Hmm.
They do it every day. They've been here since we were born. We've been together as a family unit. This is nothing new to them. And what's
Yeah.
different for them is kids who go to public school and dads who go to work.
Yeah. Got
That's
it.
the odd part, right?
Yeah.
And that's the part where we have to then remember to train them up in the practicalities of that, to see it, understand it, and realize that it is a part of everyone's life. We just do it a little differently. We've been given time and opportunity, and it wasn't just handed. This is 18 years and at least one
Hmm.
bankruptcy of
Yeah.
failure to get to this point. I got failure stacked up in
Yeah.
this room all over the
And so
place. You can't
what?
even see it.
So what would you say about failure?
It's just a mechanism of learning and experience. You can't get to learning experience through out failing. You can't do it. I mean, positive experiences do not train people on how to deal with hard times. Positive experiences give you the affirmation that I did something right when something else already failed. And in the process of failing forward, I learned how that experience applies to me. And out of that experience, I know how to properly attract time, energy, attention, and money to it so that I will have wisdom in the experience. You don't just go straight to wisdom. So failure is just a stepping stone on the path to wisdom.
Yeah. So as you're teaching, like, what is it? How do you think about the idea of working smarter?
What is working smarter? One person's smarter is another person's dumb, I guess. It's just all a matter of what and how you apply it.
Okay.
At the end of the day, working smarter for me has been to know where my boundaries, strengths, weaknesses, and threats are, what I am good at and what I'm not, and owning the things I'm not good at. And while saying I should work to improve the things I'm not good at the same time, that's somebody else's strength. That's their thing. They're very good at it. And
Yeah.
why can't I give that opportunity for them to show that strength, pour into them, lead them up, or let them do what they do best, and build out that opportunity to give others a chance to be successful? And that's working smarter. Working smarter is not just pouring everything into myself and owning it and giving accolades and naming my business, Neil Twa. It is to go out and build a momentum, a brand that allows others to be successful in that, so that I'm not the smartest person in the room anymore.
Yeah.
That's what success means.
Yeah. Now, how does mentoring play a role in all that?
Well, I think it starts in the home. I think one of the things that our culture would greatly benefit from is if more parents and guardians took a responsibility over mentoring their own children,
Hmm.
first and foremost. So for me,
And what
mentoring
and
starts
what
in
would
the
that
home.
yeah, and what would that look like in specific sense?
Well, I know that not everyone has an opportunity to have two parents. I know that not everyone has an opportunity for their parents to stay married for as long as my parents have been, 52 years.
Hmm.
I know that not everyone, I've been married for 18 years to my wife, although I had a failed first marriage. I call it my training marriage. It was a really sucky
Mm.
experience, and I don't recommend it, but I wouldn't be where I'm at or who I am without it. So I
Yeah.
wouldn't go back and change it, although it wasn't great. That was a learning experience on how to really be a husband,
Mm.
frankly, and to die to myself so that my family can prosper in that relationship, not just me. And that's a very different way of looking at it. So, mentoring and pouring in is sacrifice, really, is the word that comes to mind.
Mm.
I don't think enough parents are sacrificing for their children. They think they're sacrificing for monetary reasons, gift reasons, giving them iPads, giving them the right education, this kind of stuff, giving them the best effort to go out in the world or whatever. And I'm like, no, that's great, but don't do it at the expense of what they actually want, which is you.
The
They want your
time with
time,
you.
they want your
Yeah.
energy, they want your attention. If you're
Mm.
placing it in all these other locations, what you're basically saying in so many words from my world is you're not valuable enough for me to spend that time, energy, and attention on you. I'd rather
Yeah.
spend the money so that someone else can focus that time
Mm.
on you.
Yeah.
And I don't see that as value anymore. I see that's broken in our system. So I would give people a challenge to say, what can I do to pour back into my kids? Does that mean you have to homeschool them? I don't know. Maybe it does. For us, it was just no brainer. To do that mentoring was to bring them into a relationship. Now, people argue about all the standard talking points about why homeschool isn't good. But at the same time, my high school student outperforms your honor roll student, right? I know that because I witness it. We go down and have a 25-year, a veteran was the administrator of the school district in our area. She comes and tests all the homeschool kids to kind of see how they're placing in line. And my kids are like 2 and 3 grades above where they should be. My 16-year-old's taking college education. She got graduated last year. We just held her back because why does she need to go graduate right now? There's no purpose in that.
Hmm.
She could, but she doesn't need to. So she's taking college level courses, and we started her business, and she wrote her first book, and she's got her own store going, and she's selling products, and she's learning the business. And my 15-year-old daughter's doing the same thing, and my 12-year-old is a go-getter who's like listing stuff on eBay constantly. She's finding, and we're helping her learn up how to just arbitrage products so she can figure out
Yeah.
how to get some side hustle cash for her.
Yeah.
So, something is engaged in the mentoring and direct involvement of my children every day. And I think that's
Yeah.
something that a lot of parents try to hand off. They try to outsource it. And I see business owners making the same mistakes.
Yeah. So how does that mentoring translate into the community and into your business?
Well, frankly, if you're putting yourself in a position where you support others, you're supporting your community. If we're paying money back into the community because of our business, our service, and our life, we're supporting other members of the community, right? And
Hmm.
that can be done all kinds of different ways in terms of that. But it really gets down to how do you pour into it? I've had community groups here with children doing entrepreneurial classes.
Hmm.
Teaching them how to build their own businesses.
Yeah.
So pour back into that. Like we had a homeschool club, it was all about entrepreneurialism, and the whole class was every Friday we met for 2 hours to talk about that. Starting it up, how to do the finances, what it meant to provide a product or service, how to build a brand, how to sell yourself, how to sell the product, how to do social media marketing. I mean, we went through the whole thing. That's one way you can literally get back with your skills and expertise. That provides value to the community.
Yeah. Talk to me about stories and narratives. How have either real or fictional stories shaped you as a person?
Stories and narratives. Well, if you're not a good storyteller, most people won't listen. So I hope at least some of my stories today have kept you listening. If you're still on with me, I appreciate that. Um, you know, it literally gets down to communication. If we're going to talk about stories and narratives, at the end of the day, you know, people typically want to present something they think they are, not something they actually are, because they want to be seen as something different. I
Hmm.
am actually a dad, right? And my story is, I've got a father. He's 83 years old now. 82 or 83? 82? I think he's 82, actually. Let me don't make him older than he is. He wouldn't like that. He's a great dad. He was a hardworking dad. He was a two-tour Vietnam vet on the destroyer in the Navy. He spent a great amount of time doing that. He was a mechanic. He has been, I'm talking about as though he's in the past. He's still alive. He's still alive, just to clarify that. I was just thinking back in history as I explain him, but he taught me I'm going to call it the suck it up buttercup aspect, which was really like, how do you present who you are and do the work and then let the work show who you are? Because he didn't
Mm,
finish high school. He was a hardworking guy out of the Navy. He got to be a boilerman and then he became a mechanic and he worked in the same company for almost 30 years. He was a hardworking guy that provided, and it was just enough. If I wanted more, I had to go, mow lawns. That's what I started mowing lawns when I was 12 to make some side hustle money so I could get extra money to do things. And then eventually it was, waiting tables at 16 at a retirement home so that I could get gas money to borrow the car. We had enough to provide for our family, just didn't have more. And in our house,
yeah.
we jokingly say profit was a four-letter word, money was a four-letter word. We just didn't talk about it. To talk about it is to be negative, to disrespect what dad could provide. So we didn't talk about money in our house.
Yeah.
So I never really understood what money was or how it worked, other than just how do I work for it, and that's the
Mm,
byproduct of my work.
yeah.
But later on, I had the opportunity to get to know one of my uncles who actually was an entrepreneur, a business guy. He was a boat builder and he eventually became a philanthropist. He
Mm,
developed a whole lot of business in his lifetime. And with him, I got to really understand what it meant to think abundantly, act
yeah.
abundantly, be abundant. That was a very different conversation. I had some really insightful conversations that literally 20 years later still impact me because I didn't realize at that point I was simply naive and ignorant in the process of life and business. And while some things you hear, other things you are not listening to until much later, and it hits you and you're like, that's what he was talking about. Now, he
Yeah.
died in an aircraft accident in 2005, and I lost that mentorship. I just never realized how impactful those conversations were from his vantage point until much later in life. They started to ring true in my head. Does that make sense? Like, it
Yeah.
was like I heard what he said, but I didn't get it. You know what I mean? Because it
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
wasn't the
It
right
finally
time.
clicked.
Now I'm hearing it, right?
Yeah.
Now it's just ringing true in my head. And those kinds of things really build, a certain situation with you where you see and you act towards others differently, and everything becomes part of kind of who you are. It's interesting because just the other day I saw this, and it's so true. There's a guy who owns Zapier, which a lot
Hmm.
of people use. Maybe some of you on this. He's like a $5 billion company. He
Yeah.
gets like 1,000 views on his videos. No one listens to this guy. I'm like, the amount of information this guy has in his head, you should be listening to him. But
Hmm.
his social media, nobody listens to what he's talking about.
Yeah.
And I thought that's very fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because you can have some guy who's making, he's a 19-year-old life coach with a blue check getting 5 billion views on his YouTubes, making, 25,000 a year, and everybody's listening to this guy.
Hmm.
Like, we have to be careful where our narrative puts our value and what value we see on the world, because it can be a complete facade. And we have to be
Yeah.
very careful. And so as you get through those relationships, as you build your conversation, as you learn to be who you are, be true to that, right? Be true to that, even if your videos don't get more than 1,000 views.
Yeah.
Eventually, if it's working and you're operating, let that speak for itself. Because no matter what anybody says, this guy is a good operator.
Yeah. So, and I think you're kind of talking more about mentorship in a different way, and that some of the best mentors intersect in our lives unexpectedly or don't look like what we might expect them to look like.
100%. Well, they say when the student is ready, the mentor will appear, right? And
Yeah.
why? Because we've been listening the whole time. We just haven't been hearing.
Yeah. So let's talk about systems. How do you think about systems?
Yeah, well, systems are what make the world go round, right? Having been a systems and operations guy in the past, I know what it technically means to make a system work. What I didn't understand was how to apply that to business. So
Mm,
as I grew business and learned how to become an individual contributor, and then from there, how to become a business entrepreneur, and from there, how do you actually replicate or create force multipliers in the business so it becomes a living branded entity that doesn't necessarily need you to push every piece, every minutia, or to show
mhm.
up on every call or have every responsibility. And so what it means really is that you have to be willing to risk on people to build the systems and processes required to make it go. With AI today, some of that's changing, of course, because
Uh,
agents and other AI systems kind of sort of act like people. The problem with that I see though is that it still becomes a one person operating 20 AI tools,
Hmm.
whereas there is still a need for some intellectual capital involved in that. And I would still see the value of people who operate the tools. Maybe I'm old school that way. But having come through all this stuff, I'm still resistant to the idea that AI and technology and systems and processes and cars should automatically do everything for us. I still want to drive my own car. Thank you very much. But at the end, it's putting those in can reduce time. They might
Hmm.
create more stress on one side, reduce time on another. But here's what I know about building businesses to large scale: you cannot build a business to large scale without the primary person being able to risk greater rewards at greater segments of the business, or it simply won't grow. If you grow an individual contributing business with a few people and systems to 1 million a year, to go to 1 million to 5 is literally just time in the market and replication of systems. Once you get past that first 1 million, it is you replicating some automation and systems through assistance or getting somebody to now manage your calendar full time, or just simple little 2 millimeter shifts that allow the brand maturity of what you're doing and maybe your marketing to continue to mature at a growth rate that can be sustained by you and maybe a few operation personnel. But by the time you hit businesses that get to 5 million to 10 million, what you will normally find is they are system heavy in their requirement, because they are simply trying to replicate continued growth without the costs overreaching the bottom line. And
Hmm.
therefore you just end up with a lot more smart marketing, and that therefore you can't be the only person running every piece of the smart aspect of the business. You have to bring in the right trusted people and put them in the right seats, and some of that's going to fail. So we say hire fast and fire faster.
Yeah.
If they aren't doing certain things in easy ways, you come up with stuff like OKRs, objective and key results, and you help that person who is supposed to be strong, maybe a B player in the game, who you're going to help train up into an A player, and you give them the systems in the group, and you propel them through continuous mentoring until they can become an A player. Why do you not hire A players below 5 million? Because they will leave the business,
Yeah.
right? Because they can go do it themselves. So why are they doing it for you? A players will be trained up into the business, and with certain incentives at 5, 10 million or more, they'll want to stay on because they see the incentive of being with an entire team and seeing another potential exit or a larger valuation of that business in the next 5 years, as opposed to trying to continue to do it themselves. They also know that systems and processes are equatable to capital. And if you're going to get from 5 to 10 to 20 million a year, it's almost always a capitalization question. It always comes down to, can I capitalize the business at X amount percentage while still covering operating cost? If I'm servicing debt, if I'm servicing individuals, if I'm paying for marketing at so much growth and I'm seeing multiple channels of that growth, I want to see that sustainability. So there's a higher risk to reward ratios. And almost always that comes down to the person driving the ship. If they're not willing to get a higher risk to reward ratio, open up a new line of credit, deploy capital out to that business, it won't grow. It will
Yeah.
stagnate. And that is usually done by the person, not the systems or the processes.
So why? Because we kind of move towards what we want, and so the business enables us to get that thing that we want.
Yep.
And so that stagnation tends to come as a result of we've got what we want. We don't want anymore. So
Yeah, it
what's the
could be
difference?
that you're like, hey, I'm making X amount per year. I'm
Yeah.
happy. It's not stressful. I mean, that's different for everyone. It doesn't mean that every business has to grow to some exorbitant size to fill your ego or even additional money in your life. Give you an example. I built Voltage at a growth that I felt was comfortable, but when I realized there was a market opportunity to expand into acquisitions, I went out and raised two tranches of $50 million from a couple home offices. And in the process of growing that to create acquisitions, the market changed. The market
Mm,
changed so much it didn't make sense to deploy that capital anymore, because we were acquiring companies, or going to, that were greatly above 30-40% above asking price at that point, because it was overinflated.
yeah.
So we ended up around November 2021 turning down the capital and walking away from it and saying, nope, we can't take the money. So if we had let ego, ride the day, if we had let arrogance and pride ride the day, it most likely would have collapsed. And many of those companies did, because 2 and
Right.
3 years later, the market came back down, and the companies that were valued up here got valued down here. People that continue to push the numbers and deploy billions of dollars into investments with those companies, some of them are being investigated now by the government for fraud and questions of back to financial and fiduciary responsibilities and other questions that are coming up. And I simply stepped away from all of that. So it really just gets down to where again is time and value. It looked like a great idea until it wasn't. And since we didn't marry the idea, we were okay walking away from it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's just one of the things in business you learn to do is not marry any of your ideas, and you'll have plenty of ideas, and some of them just don't make sense anymore when you get farther down the line. Am I answering your question correctly, or at
Well,
least
there's a couple layers there, so let's peel
yeah,
them back.
yeah,
I think one thing you're hitting at, what's the difference between wanting something versus needing it, and how
yeah.
that skews our
Well,
mindset.
wanting and needing. Well,
So you,
we all want more than we have, but we actually, if we've got water, a warm place, or a cool air, or somewhere to put our head, we've got everything we need. So typically everything else is want. So the real question is, how bad do you want what, and what is it that you actually want? Is it the accolades? Is it the pride? Is it people to tap the shoulder and say, "Hey, good job. I want to be like you." Is it the money in the bank? If you reach a certain point where you're like, "Well, great, I make enough money. I don't need anything. My house is paid off. My cars are paid off. What else could I want?" Well, I want more trips. I want more this. I want more that. If the ever ending drive for you is more want, you're going to fail in it. At some point, you're going to be taken advantage of. It's the easiest way to say this. You will simply not pay attention to those who are eager to take it from you. Yeah, so wants and needs are very different. Do we really need anything when we can go down to the store and get food? Do we need anything if we can turn on the water in our faucet? Do we need anything if we have our lights on? No, not really. Everything
yeah.
else just becomes a want.
So what is it that you want in out of your business? Like you could just like let's say hypothetically you sold everything, you took the cash, you put it in the
Walked away.
investment, and you just got a dividend, and you kind of live your life.
Yep.
What is it the business gives you that by doing that you would lose?
Because I am not a golfer and I do not want to retire until my brain can't function anymore, because I can still do my business even if my body isn't functioning great.
Yeah.
I've been blessed that I don't have to go out and dig ditches or work with my hands for a living. So if my brain is sharp, I can keep going. So I love the hunter killer aspect of business. I love to hunt deals and kill them. I love to hunt businesses and get them running and then go to another one and do that again. I love
Hmm.
building brands because it's fun to see new products go to the market, especially when the consumers like them and they buy more of them. I feel that like we're making a worthy brand here because it's providing a solution, a product base, and people love it and they want more of it. That's a great feeling.
Yeah.
I just frankly have too much personal ADHD and drive in myself to not do business. It isn't really out of want anymore. It is just out of pure, I could get completely bored if I didn't have something to do. My family keeps me busy, my business keeps me busy, but I have to keep moving. And to not do that would literally be, what do I do now? I find
Yeah.
business is a passion, so it's part of like a hobby. People are like, "Well, I have hobbies. I go golfing. I do it." I'm like, "I have a hobby. It's called business.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's my hobby. I like tweaking with it. I like tinkering with it. My dad likes to get under cars and play and tinker with those things. And my father-in-law loves to go in the shop and play with the toys and tinker with stuff and run the tractors and whatnot. I'm a business tinkerer.
Yeah. What else do you want to share? What parting words of wisdom do you want to share that you didn't get a chance to yet?
That's a great question, I guess. I normally just remind people that there's a funny way of saying this. My father-in-law is a little more crude in his, and also I'll save the long crude version of it. But I would really just remind people that opportunities begin at the end of your excuses, right? And if you have an excuse for everything, if I don't have money, and you don't have the resources, be resourceful. If you don't have the time, find the time, just reprioritize, right? Well,
Yeah.
I have a family, Neil. I got other things to do. You don't understand. Well, dude, I completely get it. I homeschool 4 daughters with my wife. I get it. Like, you find the time. What you have to do is find the way to prioritize it. I would
Hmm.
remind people that family is probably their number one priority. They just don't necessarily realize it. And if you think in your world maybe you're putting the right amount of energy and time into your children, you probably aren't. If you think that somebody else is going to raise them, you're probably wrong. If you think you only have 18 summers with them, you're wrong. You can have a lot longer than that. Again, these are all choices that you make. to mature your life, your business, whatever. I just think that mostly people use excuses too much for why they don't want to do the hard things, and they believe someone else is going to do it for them. And I would just challenge you to do the hard things.
Yeah. So do the hard thing. What has helped you embrace that idea? What are the things that have helped you and really dig
Well,
into
I've
that?
had hard times. I mean, I have a screenshot on my phone when my wife was pregnant with our fourth daughter, and when we ended up in a bankruptcy.
Mm,
That was really nasty, and I had to take her down and together and go to the bankruptcy court under a dark, dank place in the city hall where they had judges set up in tables. And I had a screenshot on my phone of the amount of money we had in our bank account, which was around $569 total. And I keep that as a like a, what's the right word to say this? It's on my phone. It leaves with me. I know where it's at in case I ever need to look at it and remind myself of what's really hard. What's
mm,
hard is having the car repoed at night. What's hard is making bad decisions between food and finances. What's hard is
mhm.
looking at your children and wondering, okay, what's going to happen next month? What's hard is not having medical in case somebody gets hurt. And you're like, well, now what do I do? Don't have the finances, don't have the medical. What's hard is watching other people in your life suffer because of your actions, because of your choices. That's what's hard. Until you're in that position, it may not make any sense, right? And so I look back at everything I have, and I'm very grateful to God for what I have and all the blessings He's provided, and to keep a very firm grasp on reality, be
Yeah.
pragmatic, so that I don't have to face those consequences again, if at all possible.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Now, if someone's in that moment, they're at that courthouse in that
yeah.
dark alley with $500 in their bank and a lot of money that they owe, what would you
Mm.
tell them?
Well, in my experience, when my back was against the wall, I did the only thing I could. I went and started walking. I took the first 3 feet of steps. I call it my 3 feet, right? I just took 3 feet, 3 feet, 3 feet, 3 feet. Try something, try something. 3 feet's not a long walk. You can always look back and see where you've come. You can see the people
Mhm.
who are there to help you or not. Just keep walking. I started to look at ways to, figure out how to make some kind of money, some kind of income. The first products that we arbitraged on Amazon, I flipped with a credit card that I didn't even have the money for, right? I was willing to take that risk just to see if I could provide the income, and it worked. And it didn't work the first time, and it didn't work the second time. You just have to remember that, you know, it is, as the saying goes, it's always dark before the light, right? And there is always light and there's hope in those things. You just have to look for the good and find the small things because the big things are going to take longer. So you're going to
Mm,
have to refocus every day on what you consider small wins. Little ones, just build them up like a brick on the wall. Just keep building up the little things until you start to see the bigger things coming in. That's what I had to do. I just kept working on the little things every day, the stuff I could impact, until I looked up and saw things that were working. And as they started to work, they started to provide. But the
yeah.
real difference was trying to figure out how to create that purpose and value so that I wasn't desperately taking from other people, but to continue to push forward with that, which is very difficult to do because your mind and your heart and even your finances are all depleted.
Yeah.
So it's really tough. And it just literally, for me, it became the first pillar of my 5 F's was faith. I just had a faith that if I kept walking, good things were going to happen.
Yeah. Now, it sounds like that's the type of business that you also now help as part of Voltage. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah. So I started at the arbitrage level, flipping products, and making some hustle money.
Yeah.
But then eventually realized that the way to make the real money is in private label, building your own
Yeah.
brand. And so as I built up some cash flow and then got some business running, I started into private label and ran across a gentleman who was on the same path. His name was Reed, and had an hour long phone call and said, "Hey, we're sort of headed down the same path. What are your skills? Here are my skills." Like Napoleon.
Yeah.
What kind of skill? Yeah, ninja skills. What kind of ninja skills you got? Okay. And we're like, hey, I got some of these kinds of ninja skills. And I'm like, well, I don't have those. And it's like, hey, maybe we can do something together. So he was my Pedro. And so we went, walking and realized, we could do more together. And so we head for private label. And now everything we do is private label. Private label brands, building intrinsic value, building the stepping stones of value and the fundamentals of business first. and figuring out what the heck do I sell, which is the first question everybody has, right? And
Yeah.
I spent a long time figuring out what the heck to sell until we know exactly what to sell, and we have a whole pipeline of things to sell now in our physical product brands, and we own about 8 of those. We have 2 more coming online here shortly, and these are brands that we own and control in our business now.
Yeah. So if someone wanted to work with Voltage,
Yeah.
who's a good fit? Um,
Mhm.
and what would be a good next step for them?
Well, it's going to sound really cruel, but it's not the guy with $500 right now. I'm sorry. I know that that sounds like it might be a fit for that, but it's not. As business builders now, we deploy 50 to 200,000 in capital in the first year to the business startup. So somebody who understands money and finances and physical products is somebody who might be a high income earner or has developed some other kind of wealth without Wall Street strategy. They might be investing in real estate or franchises or other things, and they understand business building is a required capitalization requirement. They also understand time and energy have to be dedicated to that growth. It may be something they can dedicate more capital than time to. It may be something that they can dedicate more time than capital to. But in year one, they are typically willing to spend, a minimum amount of capitalization to start a real company. Their goal is to keep it running, of course. In past years 4 and 5, which I call my 8%ers, those are people who realize that real business succeeds at the 8% level in years 4 and 5, and that 92% fail because they simply don't apply the right business fundamentals in years 1 through 3. They don't understand how to run their business, make it profitable, hire the right people, do the right marketing, and ascend the business while taking some profits out to support themselves, but really growing with the end in mind, which is an exit, a saleable asset. If someone understands that and they understand what we're doing in business with e-commerce, we're applying all those similar principles across the other businesses. We just do it in a virtual platform world of online sales with physical inventory that we
Hmm.
capitalize. And that's just a slightly different mechanism than the other ones. So
Yeah.
really, it just gets down to understanding the tactics. And a lot of times people are on the path to wondering, can I do an e-commerce business? How does it work? What do I need to do to make it run? And they end up finding us when they realize, we're business builders talking and speaking business language, acquiring companies. We're not course sellers and, done for you nonsense and all this other crap you see on the interwebs of hopium, guru mindset crap. We're actually building real businesses for a true exit. And I have an intentional goal in 4 to 5 years to help them get to an exit by helping them understand what to sell, teaching them how to sell it, teaching them how to grow it, how to make it profitable, and then saying, "Hey, when your business gets mature, let me potentially buy it from you,"
Yeah.
which is part of what we do at Voltage. And business people that are hearing this right now, they understand that. They may be looking at those franchises or other ways to deploy capital and not just sticking it in Wall Street, or maybe
Yeah.
wondering, can I turn over the cash value sooner than real estate, which takes a lot longer to do. So those are typically some of the individuals. I mean, I've got doctors and lawyers and military people. I got stay-at-home moms, and I've had 19-year-old high
Yeah.
school dropouts before. We have a lot of
Yeah.
families that get involved in what we do because they want their kids to be involved. And a lot of our folks are, within 10 to 15 years of retirement from their current gig, could it be a dentist office or a W-2 high income earner,
Yeah.
they just realize, hey, I don't want to do this the rest of my life. And it's not really the legacy kind of business thing I want to hand down to my kids. What I want to hand down to
Hmm.
them is kind of as an opportunity, and I want to get the kids involved in the process. So those are typically some of the people that kind of fit what we're doing.
What's the largest size business you would look at?
In terms of acquisition or
Yeah,
growth?
or acquisition, or even just partnering
Acquisition,
with them in
we
various ways.
we're anywhere between 10 to 50 million right now is what we're acquiring it.
Okay. And
Mhm.
primarily e-commerce.
Yep.
In terms of the sales, if a lot of their sales are from their website, or are you looking more for businesses that are distributing their sales through platforms like Amazon and Walmart and Target and those kind of things?
Typically, I need them to have multiple channels. Like for example, one right now, about 80% of its sales come through Amazon, but the other 20% is direct to consumer or retail, which is growing
Mhm.
extremely fast for them. So they have multiple legs of stability in terms of time and business and multiple channels of sales, proving their product and brand. If they are heavy on the D2C side, maybe their website or Shopify or whatever, but they
Mhm.
don't have an Amazon channel or an omni channel, that's one of the things we will do through
Got
acquisition
it.
is look and say, could we create that? Is there an opportunity for it? Do we see a potential for market share on those platforms to overtake it? And if we can see our way through that, then we see the opportunity to move them into those other channels, and that would be
Yeah.
an acquisition. So I've got a couple like subscription based boxes right now that we're looking at companies doing between 10 to 15 million a year that have higher direct to consumer channels than they do any other platforms, but there's an opportunity to put them on the other platforms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, if they've already got their website, they're distributing to all these platforms,
Yeah.
and they've kind of hit a wall
Hmm.
of growth, like they kind of
Yeah.
hit their peak. Is that a company you'd be interested in talking with?
There's always opportunities to grow a business either at the profit and loss side, the
Hmm.
logistics and inventory side, management, even down to the warehousing or the pipeline supply, and of course there's brand narrative and growth sides for channels that sometimes people just can't see because they're looking at the weeds. And if you
Mm,
bring in a new set of eyes and you bring in three or four other people who have multiple talented experiences and let them, come in and say, hey, these are the things I see, you will typically unlock opportunities in those businesses that the current owner just can't see.
yeah. Is there like you mentioned the hunting piece
Yeah.
metaphor earlier? Is there a gazelle or a zebra? Is there something you are just looking for? You're like, this is the one I'd love to tackle.
Yeah. Well, that's a great, well, yeah, I think we are. It's sort of in our, what we call our buy box. But it's probably going to be around a $20 million company that has a multiple channel that just really hasn't exploited a small tweak in their narrative, a small tweak in their marketing that can make a huge impact. For example, we had a couple brands that we run, and one of the areas by which we were able in less than about 16 months to double the business size in that 16 months, which is a pretty big lift when you think about it, was to really discover just a slight variation of the current product type to another segment of a customer that wants that exact product. And to cross that over and realize, okay, they wanted this product and there you have this use case. That's why they're buying it. It's pretty obvious. Only to realize there's a whole other segment of this customer base who also buys that product. We just didn't think about how they were looking at the product. And so we shifted our
Mm,
marketing to combine that second narrative, and all of a sudden the business doubles, right? And that's
yeah,
fun because it's just like you kind of see things people don't. And you're like, oh, that product has this use case, this product, and you're doing great at this amount with these people. But hey, wait a second, there's these people. And wow, you can make this shift. We could remarket this towards that angle and watch this thing like double.
yeah,
So there's a business out there that's right in that narrative. I guarantee it. We just haven't found him yet. That I'm looking at it and I'm going to see it when it shows up, and I'll be like, that business, we could double that business in 16 months if we just go and tweak it to this market.
yeah,
What I call a 2 millimeter shift. Not huge, not dramatic, not major marketing campaigns or major ad cost spend or major spend or whatever. It's just going to be that little shift you make where suddenly you can just unlock a totally different
hmm,
viewpoint or perspective of that product. And all those people are going to be like, I got to have that too. So there's
yeah.
that zebra hanging out there.
Yeah, and I suspect part of that is because you're working with so many different types of businesses and
Yeah.
different businesses, you have visibility in ways that an individual business just isn't going to have it because they're focused on their business,
I
right?
see it from the 9 ones we control and the 12 others that we indirectly control from our client relationships and the 20 behind them who
Yeah,
are within our ecosystem. So I see those and I see all the different products, all the different brands, things they're struggling with, things they're having success with, things they're doing really well. And yeah, you can see with all of that knowledge, experience, and stuff, a view that most people can't see from their window shield.
yeah. So, one last question then.
Hmm.
What would you tell to that student, 16, 18, 19? What
Yeah.
could they do to just start that journey? What would be a step they could take to just explore building an e-commerce business of their own?
Well, what I have been telling my students is my kids and the kids that have come along for the ride is there is, everybody can figure out something a little intrinsic that they can do, they can support, they can create, they can even make to provide value to the market. It could be, well, I can make videos that help business owners see their product better. So I could learn how to use my cell phone and CapCut to just make videos to produce product videos for somebody who's producing a product. I could tweak a little thing on make t-shirts. I could go out and say, buy $100 weed whacker and start a lawn business. I could go out and get $100 power washer. Where you can get the 100 from? Well, if your parents realize they're going to help you, that might be a way to do it. It's not terribly hard for a 15-year-old to come up with $100 today. maybe it was 10 years ago or whatever, but it's not today. They got credit cards and too much access to money. But or go get a power washer, right? And go take it around the neighborhood and say, "Hey, I will power wash your driveway for $50." There are a lot of these little things people can do, or just go down to the garage sale and be like, "Hey, I wonder if I could sell this for $20. I can get it for $5. Can I list it on Facebook Marketplace or put it out on eBay?" And that's one of my daughters is doing that. There's a number of ways now through platforms or online or social media to take something you can create and amplify it through those channels and get somebody to buy. You just have to have confidence that you can sell it to them, either your product or service. And start small, start easy, start with things that you can control. But there are plenty of opportunities to do that. I wouldn't, you know, somebody might say, go game, go do Twitch, go do these other things, go get on YouTube and provide videos. And there's a value to that, I'm sure. I don't personally want my daughters doing that. That's maybe me being more conservative, but
Yeah.
there's that opportunity for them to make videos and drive up social media and get paid per view or paid per sponsorship or paid per, the systems like YouTube and TikTok and stuff that pay people to do that. There's a lot of that aspect, but that's too close to the social media influencer, stuff, and I'm not big on pushing my daughters into that.
So let's say someone's interested in learning more about what you're up to, reaching out to you. How did they learn more about Voltage?
Well, there's a couple of different ways. If you're a reader and you are curious about the strategy that we've talked about a little today in terms of building an e-commerce business, a holistic business, and something that's an asset that you might exit later on, the book that's on Amazon called Almost Automated Income with FBA can be checked out there on Amazon. If you want to grab a copy and read it, that's a great idea. If you want the book for the digital side, you can grab it at my website, voltagedm.com/book, and grab a copy of that. We have trainings, we have resources, we have workshops that are free there for people to check out more of the steps and processes, along with my podcast, the High Voltage Business Builders Podcast. About 160 episodes deep into that now. That you
Yeah.
guys can check out on Apple, Spotify, and everywhere else. There's plenty of places to touch me online. My last name really is TWA, so if you just search it, you won't have a hard time finding me.
And where does that come from?
That
TWA.
was actually Le Twa once upon a time, Letrouis. It was French. We tracked
Okay.
it back on my dad's side. We kind of lost it in Normandy, France, is where they kind of descended. But if you know Normandy, it's where the Viking hordes came down and all landed and hit the
Okay.
coast and stopped. So on my
Okay.
dad's side, hence the 6'5", blondish hair, blue-eyed guy, that's the descendant of Viking. But it got Americanized a long time ago. Great 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 grandfather. We tracked it back from the Hudson Bay Fur Trading Company. He came through Quebec, Canada, and ended up in Minnesota and
Mm,
settled in Minnesota, where my dad was born. They concatenized it down from Lettois to TWA.
yeah.
Go figure. No idea how
I
they
mean
came up
that's
with that one.
I mean there are very few last names that are three letters. That's quite a
There are
unique.
very few last names. You know what's funny, Jason? A lot of times when people hear my voice and they don't know who I am and they wonder, they come and look at the videos and like, oh, I thought he was a small Asian dude. Yeah. I get mistaken many times for that.
That's what you sound like. Yeah. Yeah, it is
No,
always
or
funny
just they
when
think of the last name, they make a mistake. They're like, oh, that's not the guy I thought he
okay.
was. Like he looks more like a Johnson or a Smith, but last name's
Yeah,
Twa.
yeah. Got it.
They mistake it. Yeah.
Well, I
Right
appreciate you
on.
sharing your story and your life
My
with
pleasure.
us. This has been an episode of the Share Life podcast, and I'm Jason Scott Matoya. We'll see you on the next one.